Can Christians be Democrats? Now, we're going to be going over this video from Cross-Examined where Dr. Frank is going to be talking about whether or not a Christian can actually support the Democrat Party. Is Christianity compatible with the Democratic platform? He's got some great insight. We're going to be going over a lot of scriptures, and I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this video. But at the end, I have one caveat to make. I have one exception to the rules that Dr. Frank is going to lay out. And so you're going to want to stick around for that. Here's Dr. Frank on whether or not a Christian can be a Democrat.
My question is, can you truly be a Christian and support the ideologies of the left wing of America?
Okay.
Sorry.
I think we're about out of time.
I'm not trying to be divisive here.
So Dr. Frank doesn't really want to answer this question because it's a tough question to answer. But I wanted to stop it real quick because I think it's important to notice what the student asked. Okay, which is it's a little different than the title of this video. The title of this video and the title of Frank's video is, can you be a Christian and be a Democrat? But what the student actually asked is, can you be a Christian and support the ideology of the left wing? And this is why I have a big caveat at the end of this video that Frank doesn't really mention, but I think is so important to bring up. So hang around to the end. Let's see what Frank responds with.
There are certainly some things that Christians can disagree over politically. And it's true that no party has everything right. Okay? We can agree on that, right?
Yes, sir.
When Jesus was going after the politicians, who were the politicians of his day? The Pharisees. Some of them were on the Sanhedrin. In Matthew 23:23, he says to them, "You've neglected the more important matters of the law. You're tithing your spices, but you're neglecting the more important matters of the law, justice and faithfulness. You should have practiced the former without neglecting the latter." In other words, you should have tithed your spices, but you shouldn't have neglected the big things.
Now, this is really important. I got to stop here one more time because this is what the entire argument hangs on. This is what the entire argument hangs on because, like he said, neither the Democrat Party nor the Republican Party has everything perfect. Neither party is the party of God. What he's going to get at here in the video is that as Christians, we're trying to find the closest thing to God. So then the question becomes, well, how do we decide? Because if each party has something wrong, then it just comes down to, my preference. And so this is what the entire argument hangs on, is this verse that he quotes in Matthew where Jesus says, "You have neglected the weightier things of the law." When Jesus says the weightier matters of the law, what he's doing is he's creating a hierarchy. He's saying not all things are equal. He's saying that justice and mercy, or as Frank says, faithfulness, justice and faithfulness are more important than the tithes, this, that, and the other. So, if justice is one of the most important things in the law, then that gives us a clue as to which things we should prioritize. And he's going to get into his next point here to back that up.
What is the first right all of us have as human beings? The right to life. The right to life is the right to all other rights. If you don't have life, you don't have anything.
Absolutely. Now what he's quoting here comes from John Locke and the natural laws, of which one of them is that we should have the right to life. But this is not just a John Lockean idea. This is actually in the Bible. This lines up with Scripture, so we can use Scripture. We don't need John Locke. In Psalm 82:3, it says, "Defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed." And then in Genesis 9:6, it says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood shall be shed." And then shedding of blood is defined in Exodus 20:13 as murder, not just killing like in warfare, but murder. So if murder is prohibited and we're not allowed to shed man's blood for no reason, innocent blood, that means that God upholds life and God gives people the right to live whom he creates. So this John Locke idea lines up with the Bible. So we do have a right to live.
So any political party that does not support the right to life, at least better than the other political party, or let me put it another way, if one party completely neglects the right to life for the unborn, and the other party tries to protect, even though not completely, the right to life for the unborn, If you're not neglecting the more important matters of the law, who are you going to have to support? You're going to have to support the party that wants to save as many babies as possible.
Right. So if justice is the weightier matter of the law, justice and mercy, if justice is there, then we must defend the unborn. That is a must, and that is of top priority, right? So what Frank is saying here is if justice is the weightier matter of the law, then having justice for the unborn should be of top priority for us. That is higher up on the hierarchy than a lot of these other issues like immigration and social issues like welfare. Okay? Because justice for the very life, I mean, this was one of the first things that God commanded people was whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood shall be shed. Then it's also again in the 10 Commandments. And then Jesus mentions it again and says, whoever has hate in his heart for his brother or who curses him has already murdered him. This is a very big thing in the eyes of God. So justice is incredibly important to the Lord. And so that's why abortion should be top priority for a believer, because we are truly defending the poor. We're defending the oppressed and the weak, like it says in Psalm 82:3.
I don't understand how Christians who know the Bible and know the platforms of both parties support the Democrats anymore. I do not understand it. Please explain it to me. Because we've gone from merely allowing abortion in the Democratic platform to now paying for it, all the way up to the moment of birth. How does anybody support this? You say, oh, well, Trump has nasty tweets. Yeah, he does. Trump's a narcissist. Okay. I get it. But when you weigh everything out, as much as you might have to hold your nose to vote a certain way, you realize that there is no way I can support the butchery or the mutilation of the genitalia of children.
So then he brings up another major issue, talking about transgenderism. But again, what he's pointing out here is that it doesn't matter whether Trump's a narcissist. It doesn't matter that Trump's had his problems. It doesn't matter. All of these things are of less importance than abortion.
And at one point, I had a question, and I said, look, I understand you don't like President Trump. I get that, okay? He's not my favorite personality either, all right? But you need to remember that when you're voting for president, you're not voting for one person. You're voting for 5,000 people to go to Washington and implement an agenda.
That is a huge point. And this is another thing that people forget all the time, is that when you're voting for the Republican or the Democrat Party, you're not just voting for that guy up on the stage. You're not just voting for, Mr. Nice Guy or Mr. Mean Guy. If you remember back when it was Trump and Kamala, right? Laughy, funny Kamala and mean, grumpy old Trump. That's not who you're voting for. You're voting for the 5,000 people with 5,000 ideologies and 5,000 ways that they want to impose their morality on the government. Those are the people that you're voting for. And so again, we're not talking about which is the party of God. We're saying which is the party that is going to represent the weightier matters of the law the closest. What is the party that is going to implement God's design the best?
Implement a platform. And you need to look at that agenda. You need to look at that platform and say, which is the closest to Christian values? Are you going to get everything? No. But are you going to get the most important things? By the way, what is the number one responsibility of government? To protect innocent people from evil. That's what Romans 13 is all about. Protect innocent people from evil. If you're not doing that, you're an illegitimate government.
Let's go to Romans 13 really quick and read that. So he's talking about this down here. He says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. There is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority resists the ordinance of God, and you will bring judgment on yourself. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. So what is the point of the ruler that God places? It is to bring terror to those who do evil. And if you want to be unafraid of authority, do what is good. They are God's ministers for you. And so and then it goes on here and it says, for he, that means the rulers, does not bear the sword in vain. That means God gives the power of the sword, of violence, of justice to the government so that it can execute that on those who do evil. Now, remember, when Paul was writing this to the Romans, he was actually, writing it while under a Roman emperor. And our government today looks very different from that. So if Paul said this about a Roman emperor, how much more about a democracy or a representative republic like what we have in America? Okay? In America, we are the government, right? And so you are the one who is supposed to bring terror to evil because you are the ruler. You, as the people of God, as citizens of this country, we are the rulers of our country. And so it is our job to bring terror to those who do evil. And it is our job to bear the sword against those people. So when you vote, it is important that you vote for people who will do that because you have the power. You have the authority to vote in people who do that. So it's actually a command for Christians that we ought to vote. Christians should never be sitting out on elections. We should always be voting, and we should be voting for people who will bring terror to evil, who will bear the sword, the enforcement, and to save the innocent, to uphold justice and mercy, the weightier matters of the law. So can a Christian be a Democrat? I don't think that a Christian can support the ideologies of the left wing. But here's my caveat. If a Democrat doesn't really support the ideologies of the left wing, then technically they could call themselves a Democrat and be a Christian. For example, I have one person in mind right now, a friend of mine who is a Christian, born again, and they call themselves a Democrat. But through conversations with them, I have realized they don't really support the ideology of the left wing. They are a very, very 1980s Democrat. In fact, I think they'd be more just a compassionate conservative. I think that's kind of more the lane they fall in. So my caveat is that yes, I think that a Democrat can be a Christian if they're not actually following the Democrat platform's ideology. But as far as the platform, like Frank said, the platform of the left wing is actually promoting the murder of unborn children. The platform of the Democrat Party is actually promoting the mutilation of the genitalia of children. So that absolutely cannot be supported. But again, there are some Democrats who say, well, I reject all that. In which case, then I guess maybe they're not really true Democrats. So it is so important to remember that we are to vote our conscience, and our conscience should come from the Bible. Abortion is a black and white issue biblically. And so we should vote for the party that aligns with the Bible on the issue of abortion. Homosexuality is a black and white issue. According to the Bible, we should vote for the party that aligns with that. On other things like how should we treat immigrants, right? That's a slightly less, there's room for more in that kind of argument. That can be addressed argument by argument, but we have got to stick with the black and white stuff first and use that as to help us decide what platform are we going to push into the White House. Then from there, we can choose people within that platform that agree with us more on specific issues like immigration, education, things like that. But we've got to hold the important things as the important things. If you guys are not subscribed, be sure to subscribe on your way out so that you can stay up to date on all of the future videos that we have coming. Drop a comment. Would love to hear from you. Let me know how this video helps you or whether you disagree. And of course, a like goes a long way as well. We'll see you guys next time.